Welcome to Leading Your Work Team. This is an ILM unit and it is brought to you by Professional Futures Limited. My name is Lindsay Heeks and I'll be your tutor for the duration of this course. This is video number 2 and in this video we'll be looking at the difference between leadership and management. Before we start though, let's have a quick review of what we achieved in the last session. In video 1 we looked at the content of this course and how you can study this formally to achieve an ILM qualification or informally for your own development. In this session we will focus on what the differences are between leadership and management. Your learning objective for this session is that you'll be able to explain the difference between leadership and management. Leadership and management are considered to be different things and we often get confused between the two, but in many organisations there are many jobs and roles that have responsibility for both leadership and management, so this is why we need to establish what the differences are. So I've got an activity now that I'd like you to get stuck into. The first thing I want you to do is to have a think about your own role and list what you were responsible for and what is expected of you. So if you were on the accredited route, turn to page 4 in your workbook and complete the activity there. And if you're on the non-accredited route, take a few minutes and note down your own thoughts. When you're ready, come back to me and click play again. So what did you notice in the last activity? Did you establish that you've got a number of defined activities for which you're responsible? Are your responsibilities to do with managing people and their outputs that they produce? Does that link to targets and objectives? What's highly likely is that you're responsible for the performance of yourself and your team and the output of your team. So the question is, how do you get people who work for you in your team to carry out the duties that you are essentially responsible for? How do you get them to achieve the best results? How do you get them to perform to the best of their ability? When you think about it, it's highly likely that you manage their outputs and engage and lead your people. So to be a team leader, you need to have both leadership and management skills. So this is why we need to look more closely at what is meant by leadership and management. So I'll come to a thinking point now, and I'd like you to have a think about how you would define what management is and what leadership is. Okay, so take a few minutes, have a think about it, and then when you're ready, come back to me and click play again. So you're likely to have come up with your own definition of what management is. So I think it would be interesting to show you some textbook definitions of what leading theorists and academics believe management to be. So the first one is by a chap called Henry Fayol. It's one of the earliest definitions of management, and he came from the scientific school of management thinking, if you like. And his definition was to manage is to forecast and plan, to organise, to command, to coordinate and to control. So you'll notice there that there's no real mention of people's skills, no real mention of leading. So it seems to be quite sort of functional, if you like. The next definition is by Breck, and that definition is management is a social process. The process consists of planning, control, coordination and motivation. So if you notice the date on this is 1957, you can see that there's now a link into more people orientated words, if you like, so social and the use of motivation, but again no real mention of leading. Okay, and the last one is from 1984 by Kuntz and O'Donnell. So managing is an operational process initially best dissected by analysing the managerial functions. The 5 essential managerial functions are planning, organising, staffing, directing and leading and controlling. So it's only the more recent definition where we have a more reference to directing and leading and involvement of people. So to finish with this, it seems to be that earlier definitions were to do with functional, operational aspects of management, and the latter definition starts to bring in some aspects of people and leading. How does that compare to your definition? So in the last slide, we looked at some theoretical definitions of management. So now we'll have a little look at some definitions linking to leadership. So the first one to look at is that one that the British military came up with, and that is to do with getting someone to do what you want them to, even if they don't want to do it. So this kind of lends itself to essentially forcing people to do what you want them to do. So it kind of doesn't feel very sort of empowering, very inspiring, very influential. But if you think about it, with the military and the armed forces, there are situations where you have to command your troops to do things that perhaps they don't want to do. How does that compare to your leadership definition? So in the previous slide, we looked at the armed forces definition, which is very similar to one offered by President Eisenhower, okay, who defined leadership as getting someone to want to do what you want them to do, essentially. So it's actually more about getting your people, your teams, if you like, to feel like they want to do what you're asking of them to do, so that you're influencing them. You are potentially giving a positive impact. You're inspiring them, you're empowering them, so your people want to do what you're asking them to do. So in other words, it's voluntary. So they're essentially following you because they want to. So there lies a difference between the military definition and this definition, and I think this one really does speak of effective leadership in the fact that it's actually about the impact that you have as a leader on the people around you and on yourself. So to start to summarise the difference between leadership and management, let's look at some more detail. Okay, so a manager is someone who gets things done through the actions of other people. So remember those definitions where it seems quite commanding, quite functional. So as a minimum, it's possible to manage people simply by giving them orders and instructions. Do this, do that, go to here, and so on. But that's not essentially leading them. Whereas a leader is someone who, by some means or other, makes people want to do what they do for him or her. And whether that's through his or her personality, through good example, through behaviours, through letting people take their own responsibilities, through empowerment, etc., etc. So the biggest difference between managers and leaders is the way that they motivate the people who work or follow them. And that sets the tone for most of our aspects of what they do. So many people are essentially both. So they may well have a management job, but understand that in order to get the best out of their teams, they need to also lead them. So whether that's through their personality, whether that's through empowerment, whether it's through influence. So managers have subordinates, okay, and that's by definition. So with that, they may well have an authoritarian and a transactional style. So in other words, they have a position of authority that's been given to them by their organisation, and their staff work for them and largely do as they're told. Their style can be transactional in that the manager tells them what to do, and the subordinate is an awful word, that. So the staff member doesn't do it just because they're a robot, if you like. They're doing it because they've been promised a reward, and that might well be at a minimum their salary for doing so. So as we established earlier, leading people is essentially an inspiring and influential kind of role, and leaders have followers, and followers are voluntary, if you like. So leaders don't have subordinates, that awful word again. So at least not when they're leading. Okay, so many organisational leaders will have subordinates, but only because they're managers as well as leaders. Okay, so when we want to lead, we have to give up that authoritarian control, because of the fact that leading is to have followers, and as I've already mentioned, following is a voluntary activity. People choose to follow people. So think about politics, and think about the parties that you follow. No one's forcing you to. It's your choice to follow the parties that you want to follow. So as being a leader is about being influential and empowering, leaders tend to have a charismatic or a transformational style of leadership. So we know that being told what to do isn't inspiring, and it doesn't inspire you to want to follow an individual. So in order to lead them, you have to appeal to your teams, showing them that by following you, it will actually lead to something that they desire. So they must want to follow you enough to stop what they're doing and potentially walk into dangerous situations or risky situations that they wouldn't normally do. Okay, so leaders with a strong charisma tend to find it easier to attract people to their cause, because of the fact that they can be quite persuasive, and usually that persuasion helps to promise transformational benefits, which might well be more than extrinsic rewards such as a bonus or whatever. It's likely to be more about developing yourself, becoming a better person, becoming more experienced, more developed in your area of desire, if you like. So I think it's useful to have a look at some of the key words that you would associate with leadership and management. Okay, so if you look in the leadership section, we've got things like inspiring, motivate, we've got innovate, develop, set the pace and the vision, if you like. And then under the management section, we've got control, organise, administer, maintain, follow procedure. So you can see from the different words that are associated with leadership and management that leadership is about the people side of things. It's about engaging, it's about influencing, it's about getting people on side. Whereas management is very functional in essentially about getting people to do things, okay, because of the authority that's vested in you. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with management. We need to have management in order to get our activities done. We couldn't have an organisation full of leaders. So an ideal balance of leadership and management in one individual would be perfect. So let's summarise what we've learnt so far. Okay, so the difference between leadership and management can be attributed to assigned authority and the ability to either direct or to be able to appeal to our team so that they want to follow us. Leaders aren't always in positions of responsibility, but can also be managers as well. So our learning objective for this session, it was that you can explain the difference between leadership and management, and hopefully that's now an objective that you can achieve. In our next session, which is video number 3, we'll be identifying why leadership is so important within an organisational context. Visit our website to access our full course on leading your work team, and this includes a really useful assignment guide to help you get through the accredited assessed work. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you never miss a new unit. And finally, hope you enjoy your next video in this suite.